I now call this meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to order. I'm Melissa Meli, the spy.
I'm Tyler Riley, cop and a half.
I'm Tristan Miller, the saucy sleuth. And we have with us today...
Clint McElroy, the elderly amateur detective.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
I didn't know there was that much prep involved.
I'm sorry, we gotta put you on this spot.
Yeah, I know. Forgot about that part. But today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/adcpod and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/adcpod. We got any book recommendations today?
Well, the short story we're talking about now is encompassed in The Innocence of Father Brown, which is available on Audible. You can download all of the short stories. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah, tripped me up.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got through it.
Yeah, you bought the entire...
I did. I bought the wrong thing that had the right story in it.
Mm-hmm.
I started to read it on my Amazon Kindle, and it was like 5 hours and 57 minutes left, and I was like, good grief. This is...
Not a short story.
This is not a short story. What happened?
Yeah, what are the novels like?
And then...
Goodness.
Kindle does not give you the table of contents up front. It just starts on the first story.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I was very confused.
Yeah.
Amazon, do better.
In so many ways.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So,
But thank you for our Audible.
yeah.
Yes, we love you.
Yeah, let's not cheese them off already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Who are we, John Oliver? So, Clint, you chose this story.
Yes.
Why, and also, what's your experience with Father Brown? How did you get to know him?
I have always been a kind of a streak reader. Like I blasted through every Poirot book and story, and any kind of series, literary series. I've always been like that. I will read them all in one sitting, and I'm having trouble, but I read them years and years ago. And actually, I came to G.K. Chesterton first because I found him a fascinating person, a fascinating, whatever you want to call him. He did so many things, a philosopher, theologian, writer, bon vivant. I mean, he was just a fascinating character. And I read a quote of his that was, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it was about going into the country to draw on a piece of brown paper with chalk. Mm-hmm. And he wrote this whole story about how he had forgotten to bring the white chalk. And he went into a whole thing about white, and everything G.K. Chesterton did had a reason to it, even the Father Brown stories. And so I said, oh, well, that might be interesting. So I started with the Father Brown stories and read them all straight through just because I liked the fact that the stories had something to say about the human condition, and not just coming up with clever ways to solve a mystery, but they had something to say. Whether you agreed with it or not, it had something to say. And I always found that absolutely fascinating about Chesterton and the Father Brown stories in particular.
Yeah, I noticed that the language is really... It's very specific, but very descriptive. Yeah. It's not very descriptive like Tolkien, where it's, pages and pages about the tree on the corner.
Stephen R. Donaldson, and there's another author that I absolutely love. Robert Jordan Robert Jordan would go 12 pages describing a bowl of fruit.
Yeah.
But Chesterton started out as an artist. Chesterton wanted to be an artist, and I think that you see in his writing a use of a palette almost. I mean, he uses a lot of color, especially in the first part of the Blue Cross. He uses a lot of color in his descriptions, and he uses very basic colors: blues, reds, greens, and I think he approached it from kind of a visual manner.
That makes a lot of sense. He really is painting with his language in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
So we actually started this podcast because we were hearing your family talk about
Get out!
Yeah. And we were like, oh, that sounds interesting.
So we decided, we might as well talk about it and make it a podcast. And now here we are, many episodes in.
It's one of the few literary influences that all four of us share. I mean, we share a lot, but Justin, Travis, and Griffin are huge Poirot heads. So I think that, and in our second graphic novel, let's face it, is basically influenced by Murder on the Orient Express because Griffin's such a huge fan.
We recently watched all 3 movie versions of Murder on the Orient Express. Which one is your favorite?
Finney. I just I like the Brana one. I really did. And I think that he did a good job of capturing the quirks of Poirot. And I think that was very effective. But let's face it, if you're going to do a movie these days, there has to be hanging off the trestles, fighting the bad guys, explosives. And you have to have the setting out in a dining room table in the snow. I understand that you have to do that. Whereas I felt like the Finney one was a little bit truer to the spirit of it. But I think that would be my favorite. Has some of my favorite actors of all time in it.
The casting is incredible. Actually, in all 3 of the ones we watched, there's a lot of really, really spot on casting. I thought all of the versions, the 3 versions that we watched, were really, they had value in their own right.
It's nice to have different Murder on the Orient Expresses to recommend to people. Because not my nan, I wouldn't suggest a Kenneth Branagh version, but I probably would suggest the Suchet or Finney version.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very used to seeing Suchet because we've actually watched quite a bit of we're making our way through the television.
He's so good. I mean, he's just so amazing. I remember the first time I ever saw him interviewed after I had watched the first couple of seasons of it and said, well, wait a minute, he doesn't have a Belgian accent. Who's this guy pretending to be?
No.
Absolutely.
There's also a series of Father Brown on BBC that started in 2013. Are you a fan of this the television series based on the books?
I've only seen few minutes of one of them, but this has kind of recharged me. Rereading Blue Cross has kind of recharged me, and I'm gonna check them out. Now, I have seen every episode of the Father Dowling mysteries.
Yes,
the bastardized version of Father Brown.
Me too.
And I can remember watching the Barnard Hughes one-off. Barnard Hughes did a made-for-TV project, which was supposed to have been a pilot for a series that just never kind of took it. They made him an action hero, and it was a little weird.
Gotcha.
I can't imagine that with this character. I can't imagine getting the Brana treatment, as it were.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So, this is my first experience with Father Brown. Tyler was saying, is this that this was an introduction to the character, sort of?
Yeah, it was. And it was kind of if you were talking in well, we've already mentioned a couple of times, TV parlance, it almost reads like a backdoor pilot for Father Brown, because the whole story starts with Inspector Valentine. And Inspector Valentine of the Paris police is painted in these broad, glorious spectrums, like the ultimate detective, and Chesterton makes a very conscious choice that the whole story barely has Father Brown in it.
I was very surprised by that.
And you don't know it's Father Brown even until almost the very end. And that was, I think, to me, a brilliant piece of the writing. You meet this Valentine, this brilliant detective, described in terms like, Doyle would describe Holmes, or he's the best.
Almost.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. He almost feels like a send-up of Poirot, because he's French and he has a cane and a hat.
Very like a smaller man, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that it comes out along, and you even meet the bad guy, Flambeau, before you meet Father Brown. Now, here's what I love about these stories, and what I love about the Father Brown series in particular. Those first 5, 6, 7, 8 short stories you were mentioning before about how, it was tough telling chapters, and, they read like a novel, because the story progresses from that first episode into the second episode with continue with Valentine in a very weird way. But then the stories progress, and Flambeau, this master criminal, the Moriarty of this whole series, Flambeau becomes, his story progresses. He becomes friends with Father Brown. They become partners, crime-fighting buddy picture of a priest and a master criminal who reforms and becomes one of the good guys. And the story actually has a running through line from those first chapters that read like a novel. Things happen. Characters change. In the case of Valentine, in a major way. But that's one of the things that I think Chesterton was kind of ahead of his time. There would be, I think, like even in the Holmes stories, there would be callbacks to previous things and mentions of say, Moriarty and other elements like that. But this one really felt like episodes that were all connected into one long storyline. I think that lent itself to me, when I started reading them, of reading it straight through and not being able to put it down. Because I'm very much a jump around reader. I've got like 20 books on my nightstand, and whatever mood I'm in, I'm going to read.
Yeah.
But Father Brown really kind of lent itself to go, what's going to happen next in this overarching story?
Oh, that's so interesting. Because, so many detective stories really are very self-contained. So, like you episodic. You get little things here and there. Like, for instance, with Poirot, you can really read whichever one. I mean, not in all cases, of course, but you can read whichever. You don't have to start with Mysterious Affair at Styles. Like, you can jump around a little bit. A lot of people, I'm sure, start with Murder on the Orient Express. But if you do start there, or if you start with the short stories, you really can follow. Basically, where is Hastings? What is he doing? Is he in South America? Is he married yet? But it's not really that important to know that for the context of each, is the point I'm driving at.
Which Doyle did with Watson as well. I mean, Watson's life went through changes. Things happened to Watson. And I think that kind of carried through in the storyline, the through story of the Sherlock Holmes book.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I have so little, I have like anecdotal Sherlock Holmes knowledge, but I haven't read any of it, surprisingly, which is just really funny because of how much I love the genre. But I know more about it through pop culture and Star Trek at this point, which is a really bizarre way to know.
Sure, if you can't get to Sherlock Holmes through Mr. Data, I don't know how you can.
Exactly right.
100%. So this short story, it starts off with, as you were saying, the detective Valentine, and he arrives in, is it England?
Yes, he crosses the channel in pursuit of Flambeau, the master criminal.
Yeah.
Yes, and you really get like a Javert, and although I mean Valentine seems much nicer than Javert, but but like the pursuit with Javert and but Flambeau, of course, it does seem to be this master criminal.
He's acrobatic, he's huge, he's smart.
Master of disguise.
Every men want to be him, women want to be with him, other men want to be with him. It's great.
Except that, of course, Flambeau is extremely tall. So he's a master of disguise only in as much as they are 6'4".
He can be disguised as a tall person.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
End of list.
Yeah.
And to his credit, Chesterton acknowledges that. He said he has a line in there. I don't remember if it's in Blue Cross or in one of the other stories where he says you could track him if you were looking for a very tall fireman or a very tall message boy or a very tall chef. Yeah. And the thing is, if you to a certain extent, and this is what's tough about reading these stories now, much like you were mentioning the Sherlock Holmes stories, is you can't. It's impossible to read them in a vacuum, but you have to imagine. When Blue Cross first came out, the title was Valentine Follows a Curious Trail. So it wasn't a Father Brown story, the first one that came out. You thought this was a story about Valentine. And so, with that shows Chesterton's brilliance even more, because you're setting down a trail. Oh, okay, it's another story about another genius, detective chasing a master criminal, and then throws that little hook in later on.
I think
we also learned a lot about Valentine, the inspector, and all the things that he'll go through in order to catch a criminal.
Yeah,
right.
And it's just good grief, who has the time to repaint all these numbers on the street in the dead of night
in this economy?
And I think he also set up a fake mailbox at one point. I'm just that is dedication, sir.
Something that stood out to me when he was describing Flambeau and his disguises was Flambeau could no more disguise himself as a short man as a giraffe could a cat, which I thought was very solid.
I love it. Yeah, and you're right. His method is really interesting, because he basically says, the way I solve so many crimes is I look at the obvious stuff and, well, okay, then I'll just let my gut take me where it will. One of my favorite quotes, I wrote it down when I was rereading it: the criminal is the creative artist, the detective is only the critic. I thought that was very insightful. I thought that was a very cool, and the fact that Chesterton was primarily, when he first started out, a critic of theater, of art, of writing. A lot of humor in there.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's wonderful.
Absolutely. I like also how Valentine is he's not a thinking machine, because machines can't think, and he thinks that is outdated and silly, which I think is very French as well. It's the point of people is that they think and they have guts and instincts, and that's the thing I'm going to lean into, which I thought was very, very cool.
Let me ask you all a question. When did the Poirot books first start coming out?
Ooh.
I believe in the 30s, the 1930s.
Well, see, this story came out in 1910.
Yeah, it's in public domain.
Yeah, so these stories came out 20 years before Poirot. And it's so amazing to me, because you even said Valentine sounds like Poirot, and okay, here I'm going to show my super trivia nerdy. Flambeau's first name was Hercule. Okay, there we go. There we go.
Wow. Wow.
I'm a goon. I'm a dork.
Oh boy. Okay. So
No, that's very
Agatha.
interesting.
No, I'm not saying that. No, don't get that
Agatha's
started.
hack and stole everything.
Clint McElroy accuses Agatha Christie of being.
This is how we get this podcast on the map.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Hot takes.
And me in jail. Christie plagiarist? What?
I know. That Agatha Christie estate. Oof.
No, we would be blacklisted from so many groups.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. We would lose 100% of our audience.
And all of her fans know how to poison people. So, no thanks.
It's
I didn't
true.
say that. I recant it all.
Yeah. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa.
But of course, there's always influence in every writer. I mean, everyone's going to be taking little like inspiration from folks, and there's nothing wrong with that for sure.
No, there's not. I mean, because who is it? Somebody once said there are only 7 original ideas, for plots. I used to teach when I taught theater at Marshall University. I always devoted one class where we would spend half an hour running through the plots of really well-known movies. But any plot can be so boiled down, it makes, you don't see any connection. Girl tries to get home by making 4 new friends. Okay, Wizard of Oz? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can streamline anything down to where it does not sound, special, and like the expression, probably G.K. Chesterton would use this expression, God is in the details. It's how you render that plot and that dialogue and how the story progresses and the twists and turns.
Absolutely. Yes. So we get this very vivid picture of Valentine and of Flambeau, who he is chasing. And then he comes across a small priest. Or like
on
he's
the train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it talks about how he's not a religious man, but it engenders some sort of like warm feelings and pity in him. Like just looking at his face, like he gets good vibes from this priest, right?
He also does describe him as like very dopey and bumbling and foolish, letting him know that letting everybody on the train know that he has like, oh, careful, I keep losing this package, but it has a really expensive thing in it.
Yeah.
Which
a mooncalf simplicity.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Mooncalf is very Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice because it's also kind of a counter to what comes later, like you were saying, with like Sherlock and Hercule Poirot, of like Father Brown is like such a simple, like it's obvious, it's just really kind, and I don't know, it's like
it's almost oh gosh, the name just went right out of my head. Number One Ladies Detective Agency.
Oh sure,
Mavra Motsway.
Yeah, it's very like I don't know, it's really lovely when you have a simple character being able to achieve great things on their own. And for me, it reminded me kind of a Bilbo Baggins situation of like, here's a normal person able to do extraordinary things, as opposed to an extraordinary person just doing extraordinary things, which is also wonderful in its own way.
Yeah.
And I think that the contrast there's like Columbo. Columbo always was being looked down on. He looked. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, let me ask you one more question. Just one more. One more thing. He's always rumpled. His hair is always a mess. He's always complaining about his stomach and griping about his wife, and does not look like he's the sharpest, knife in the drawer. And he's the smartest person in the room always. Mm-hmm. And so I think that Chesterton uses that with Father Brown, very unassuming. And again, reading it in a vacuum, putting yourself back in 1910, reading this story, he drops the mention of this priest who doesn't even name him at the beginning. Oh, God, this priest, and it's just another incident. But cleverly, it still sets up the crime. It still sets up what's going on. And that was what I loved about it. I could imagine looking back, because I know I'm reading a Father Brown story, So I said, there's Father Brown. I thought, but you know what? If I had, read it 110 years ago, I invented time travel, apparently.
Uh-huh.
B, I would think, that's just a way to introduce the MacGuffin, a way to introduce what's going to be stolen.
Yeah.
And then as it goes on, well, I'm getting ahead of your proposal. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay.
I'm just very excited about this story.
It is. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And it moves so quickly too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he loses track of Flambeau. He can't find him. And he ends up at this restaurant, right? So.
Yes. Though, did we mention what exactly was stolen? Did we mention that it was a sterling silver cross with blue stones?
Right.
The titular role.
Blue cross?
Yeah.
Yeah. One can assume.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he ends up at this restaurant, and there's like,
which I love because he's like, oh man, I lost him. Better get some coffee, and now I'm hungry. You can't think on an empty stomach. And I'm like, I respect that. It was very Agent Cooper as well, which
some really good pie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some very good pie.
Very relatable. Always. I mean, if you don't know what to do next, why not get some food? So he's at this restaurant, and there's like a stain on the wall, and the salt and sugar containers have been switched, and he starts chatting with the waiter, and the waiter is like, oh yeah, it must have been those two clergymen, and he recounts this story of these clergymen who were like, one of them was throwing stuff against the wall, like they were causing this huge ruckus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which
two popes got nothing on this.
No. Would be very notable to anyone. I mean, like really causing a scene, and especially priests doing that. Like that's completely wild idea. So like it seems really strange, but also at the same time, like
not nuts.
No. Right.
Like,
well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh,
we'll get nuts.
Oh yeah.
So apparently one of them also, they should have been charged 4 shillings, and they were, they then saw that the waiter saw that the bill actually had 14 shillings written on it instead, and then he gave, he paid him the 14 shillings without question, and then, slammed through the window.
Yeah, because he's like, this will pay for this.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely baller. Like, and then Valentine goes to the market. Is that what happens next?
Yeah, he goes to the grocer, and he remarks that the cart, like, the sign for Brazilian nuts is above the oranges, and vice versa. And then again, the grocer's like, must have been those 2 clergymen.
Yeah, those 2 priests.
It's just like, what is going on?
One small and one large. Same kind of deal.
Truly, like, they run into the stand and they're like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And they switch it over. Yeah. It's very Laurel and Hardy. It's very,
Oh yeah, because they knock down the apples.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the smaller clergyman comes back and says, I'm so sorry, I misplaced a package. And if you find it, please send it to Westminster. And the shopkeeper did find this package and sent it out as instructed. So the shopkeeper points them in the direction of Hempstead Heath, which is where they had been scheduled to go. And then Valentine watches because he finds these 2 priests, and he like, it sounds like he's like hiding behind a tree. Yeah. Watching them have a conversation.
Yeah, I imagine him like in a bush. It's described like here. There's a hill and then like a bench, and they're like hiding in the bushes behind just under the hill. Very, very Fellowship of the Ring with the Black Riders. Just very like.
Yeah, or Beatrice with her like one branch in Much Ado, listening to.
A singular leaf.
Yeah. Total setup.
But yeah, when he catches up, like, they are just, like, having a full-on argument.
Yeah.
About theology.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the very tall priest is getting in on reason. Like, he's trying to say that, you know, this reasonable argument isn't a good idea.
I start out.
Keep that in.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this great episode with Clinton McElroy.
Is that his full name?
I believe that is what Justin has called him.
Oh, okay.
On the podcast, in public. So, a Papa Max is what I want to...
Oh, boy.
The good old Papa Max. Thank you so much for listening to this. It was an absolute pleasure to have him on. Reminder that we are on the Scavengers Network. You can go to scavengersnetwork.com and take a look at all the content they have available there. There's podcasts, there's videos, there's all sorts of great nonsense. They have podcasts like Historical Hotties, which is the horniest show I have ever been on, where they rate historical figures by their sexiness. My episode was about the late, great James Lipton. You also have State Your Case, which is a weekly podcast that aims to create sleeker, better versions of America by evaluating each state on their own merits and then deciding whether or not to include them in the Union, which seems applicable.
Yep.
Also, I just started a new podcast because I don't have enough. It's called Focus Testing. Tucker Daly Johnson and I create movies based off of a random prompt. We improvise them. The first 3 episodes are out on most major podcatchers, with a very special guest on the 3rd one of Mike Kaplan, who is a great friend of mine and a very great comedian. So check that out if you want. If you think I'm funny, check it out. If you don't think I'm funny, still check it out and just power through it. Papa needs those numbers.
In a world where the human race struggles to do with their $10 or less, ADC's Patreon is here for you. For $10 a month, you can place an ad for your business during the show, or just for yourself. No judgment here. You'll also receive early access to all the shows plus bonus content and episodes. At $3, we don't need you taking up our time with your sweet, sweet nothings. We just want you to get access to all the shows and bonus content. And for $1, well, thanks. Also, I would like to plug this week. I will begin on this Tuesday, June 9th, I believe. Time is relative.
Yes.
Yes, Tuesday, June 9th, on Instagram, I will begin a series called Tune Tuesdays, where I will have a guest on Instagram Live. They will be given a song questionnaire in advance, and it's pretty much just a listen and conversation show.
Love it.
We will also raise money. There will be a donate button to a charity or organization of my guest choice, towards the empowerment and betterment of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
So check us out. It's 7 o'clock. I should also say the time. 7 o'clock this Tuesday on
night?
Instagram Live at my handle. Yes, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My Instagram handle is at It's Tyler Riley. Yes, It is included. So at It's Tyler Riley, all one word. 7 o'clock this Tuesday, where my guest will be my best friend and artistic director of Company of Fools, Cameron Clark. I don't believe you interviewed for the position, sir.
I applied, but my application never arrived on your desk, I see.
Tyler shrugged.
Blame USPS. Like, I ain't got nothing to do with that.
I emailed it.
Oh, well, that's
sorry.
why.
1994 called and said, go back to when fax machines were relevant.
1994 called and said, hey, you're 2 years old. Why are you touching a fax machine? Get off of that. This ain't funny.
Be sure to follow us also on social media, the podcast, ADC Pod, at ADC Pod on all of the social media that matters. So as long as you're not like a teenager, I think that means Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Because the teenagers with, what are they doing now? Snapchat?
The TikTok.
Don't get on TikTok.
TikToking. Right? Is that what you mean?
No. I do have a question for you, Melissa.
Yes.
Is there some kind of group on Facebook also?
Yes, there is. It's called the Amateur Detective Club. Please answer those membership questions for us so that we know you are a real person.
Also, thank you everybody who joined us on our live stream for trying to raise some funds for various organizations that are assisting those who are fighting for justice across the country right now. You can, if you send us a receipt at any of the places that Melissa just mentioned of you donating to an organization, you will receive 2 audio commentaries for the David Suchet version and the Kenneth Branagh version of Murder on the Orient Express that we recorded live last Thursday, which seems like forever ago. But I want to thank you very much. And also, here are some other places that you can just donate as well, even if you don't want the audio commentary. If you're sick of hearing our voices, but still want to help, here you go.
Atlanta, atlsolidaritynetwork.org. Chicago, chicagobond.org/donate. Louisville is actionnetwork.org. And Minnesota, as we mentioned earlier, in Brooklyn, it is brooklynbailfund.org/donate. The Bronx, thebronxfreedomfund.org. Philadelphia, phillybailout.com/donate. And Los Angeles, gofundme.com, and find People's City Council Ticket Fund.
And so then, of course, there's the big reveal that this smaller priest is indeed Father Brown. And he has identified that the taller priest, who is actually Flambeau in disguise, is, he's known he was a fraud from the beginning because he set up all these absurd situations. He throwing the soup against the wall in the restaurant and knocking over all the apples and the orange and changing the signs and the oranges and overpaying the bill. He didn't question any of those things, just went along with it. But
it's too good at yes-anding.
Yeah.
Starting with the salt and sugar switch.
Yes.
It was the first thing that kind of tipped Father Brown off, because he swapped the salt sugar. Flambeau in disguise loads up his coffee with salt and doesn't bat an eye. And that's a key to Father Brown's character, that insight and that observation and knowing the human character.
Right. Because he had suspected something was off, and he swapped them knowing that if someone was up to no good, that they would just go along with everything, to try and disguise their bigger deception.
Yeah.
And he gave himself away when he started criticizing reason.
The line that Father Brown has, "You attacked reason. That's bad theology," is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
It's such a great line.
Yeah.
And that whole debate between Flambeau and Father Brown, when Flambeau is still trying to be a priest, is really at the heart of what makes the Father Brown stories so unique. Chesterton was a he loved to debate. He and George Bernard Shaw were best friends who argued all the time. And if you studied debate, or if you have ever been a debater, especially when it's taught on the collegiate level, high school level, wherever it's taught, a good debater can debate either side of an argument. And so Chesterton was a brilliant debater. And these days, there's so much criticism of organized religion, and this is obviously not the venue to discuss that, but
sure it
is. Chesterton's all about reasoning, and he has one line in there, I can't remember what it is, and I thought I wrote it down. Oh, I know. Alone on earth, the church affirms that God himself is bound by reason. That was pretty revolutionary talk for 1910. That what? God has to follow reason? Well, basically Chesterton said God set up this system with rules. He's got to follow the same rules of this system he set up. And I think and that whole insight into that faith, that theology, that whatever belief system, however you want to call it, is at the very heart of what Father Brown is all about. And that's what makes it so brilliant. And then I think if you were reading it, like I said, in a vacuum in 1910, you started going, well, this is kind of weird behavior. But it's not until this moment you go, oh, wait a minute, there's the star of the show.
Yeah.
Oh, there's our hero.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great moment.
Yeah, a big switch. And it almost is like it happens basically at the same moment when he is finally named as Father Brown, which is really a lovely device that he uses to, once he gives the character a name, that he really comes out to be the main character. But yes, of course, Valentine has been hiding in the bushes because Flambeau is threatening Father Brown, saying, clearly physically I could overpower you. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. But I have set up this whole trail for law enforcement to follow. And as if on cue, Valentine comes out and apprehends him. So.
And he also sent the package with the Blue Cross away because he gives the package to Flambeau. And Flambeau's like, oh man, it's just a bunch of sticks or something.
Oh, right.
Man. And he's like, yeah, that's something I learned from other criminals that I've talked to over the years. You hear a lot of weird stuff in confessional, which I thought was very dope.
Yes. Yeah. You don't spend this many years in a confessional without learning some of the ways of, some of the evil ways.
And that is another key to all of the Father Brown stories. Mm-hmm. Think about it. In essence, a priest, would not be a killer, a criminal, something along those lines. But through confession, Father Brown knows all about the human condition.
Right.
He's not an innocent. He knows about this. And that is a basis for all of the Father Brown stories. These insights that he has because he has seen the worst. If you notice, and it takes some reading of some of the stories, Father Brown isn't always smiling and happy and joyful. He's seen the dark side. And just because he hasn't lived in that dark side, he has experienced that dark side. He knows about it. And it's his insights into that human condition we mentioned before that are almost always the key to the story, and a key to the mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really, it's a great intro. It really is just a great intro to a character, this story. I mean, and it's a fun story too to follow. Like it's not the most, a theft of a jeweled cross is maybe not the most like sensational crime ever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's in its simplicity, really shines, and it gives you a lot. And it makes you want more. It makes you want to hear more,
Yes,
like you were
does.
saying before.
Oh, well, not only that, but if you think that's bad, in a future story, Flambeau steals somebody's flatware.
Oh no!
I'm not kidding. So
He just
ooh, that man!
oh, that Flambeau stealing cutlery. What's he thinking?
Not my good china. No.
oh no.
'Twas a wedding gift.
I mean,
Yeah, but flatware is expensive.
it
is.
certainly can be. And it can
Goes to a pawn shop.
and it can be sentimental too, like Angus MacDonald's flatware in
Absolutely.
I had not made that connection until you just said that. So
yeah.
you.
So, overall, what do we all think of this short story?
We do 5 mustaches instead of stars because Poirot's mustache, of course. You know, like 5, big ol' 5 from me. The language was absolutely beautiful, but in such a way that is enriching and not mind-numbing. I love I love some detail, but I start to drift if it gets so florid that I don't know what the plot is anymore.
Yeah.
And he never does that. He is being real deliberate with, now that I know he was a painter, I'm gonna use that metaphor constantly, with the brush strokes of his language. And really very deliberate. A+ setup of these characters, intro, and the easy to follow, and the switch at the end where you find out who the real main character is. Very exciting, very pleasant read. I liked it a whole lot.
Yeah, I would give it 4 and a handlebar. Just because, for all the reasons that Melissa stated, I really, really enjoyed it and really wanted more from it. But there was a section, and I highlighted it, where it's Valentine, and he remembered now how Flambeau had escaped, once by a pair of nail scissors, once by a house on fire, once by having to pay for an unstamped letter, and once by getting people to look through a telescope at a comet that might destroy the world. And I was like, I want to know more about each of those things.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I think I would give it a 4 and a soul patch, as featured in Kenneth Branagh's Poirot.
Okay.
Heretic!
Yes. Well, don't get me even started about the John Malkovich facial hair situation. I don't want to hear it. But yeah, it was really good. Sometimes the language to me it's always very beautiful, but I was a little come on, give me the next beat. But that's because I wanted to know more. It wasn't a detriment. So it took me a little bit to settle into how it was written. That also, I think, and this is my fault, I listened to an audiobook version, not the one available at audibletrial.com/ADDCpod, but the one available for free on YouTube. And it was an American reader. And so the accents were bad, and the way in which it's just this profoundly non-American way to write. And so I think that dissonance really, skewed me. And
yeah,
so I think
that is on you, Tristan.
Yeah, that is 100% on me. So, overall, I'd say the story is a 4.5 or 5, but the reading experience was a 2.
Oh, all right.
You certainly read the words.
I see. Don't listen to the one on YouTube then.
For free.
Oh,
Yikes.
yes, I did listen to a bit of that, and it sounded like the guy that used to narrate all of those Don Bluth trailers from
Yeah.
the 80s.
Like Pebble the Penguin and whatnot, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I would go with 4 and 1 mutton chop.
Truly
Just because
German.
I like mutton chops. It is one of my favorite detective short stories. And to me it was just eye-opening. it was not the first Father Brown story that I read. I read just one of the short stories at random, and it wasn't until I went back and read it and I think if I could have traveled back in time and read it in 1910, it would have been a 5 altogether. But you can't. I mean, that's impossible to do. But I would urge you that if you did enjoy it, continue to read the short stories in order, because, like I said, you want to know more about Flambeau? Well, Flambeau becomes his Watson, becomes his Hastings. They become partners in solving crimes. And Valentine is used in the second story in a really different kind of way. But they do kind of flesh out those things. And like I said before, the uniqueness of Father Brown with comments about the human condition and, going a little bit deeper. He is, in some ways, he's the anti-Poirot, at least in personality. And in a way, he's kind of the anti-Holmes in his use of reasoning and starting with the human condition and then working to logic. He is more inductive than deductive, as Holmes is. And so that it's very appealing. And like I said, each one of those early stories feels like the chapter of an overall book. Now, Chesterton himself admitted later in life that by the time he was finishing up, he did something like 52, 53 stories. And there's a quote he has about it. He says, "I will say in all earnestness that the last stories I've written have been some of the worst mystery stories ever written." He was very honest. It sounds like a critic there, but for the most part, they have something to say about people, and anything that can give you a little bit more insight into people, whether it was 110 years ago or not, is still is very useful. They're very, very cool stories.
Yeah, it holds up. For sure.
I would say they're also very hopeful stories, which is nice.
Yeah.
They're very uplifting, which is good.
Yeah.
And I think worth pursuing always, but particularly now.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, that's one of the great quotes. I was telling you the story about the chalk and the drawing on the paper that Chesterton wrote in an essay. And the point of the whole essay was that he had forgotten the white chalk. And if you're going to be, any artist will tell you that if you're drawing on brown paper, you have to have white chalk, because white chalk is a color. And white chalk is a color just like red and black. And his point was that it was like people, that doing good, that if you ignore evil and you don't participate in evil, that's not being good. That you have to be white. You have to be that color white. You have to be that positive things and do positive things. And not just, well, I didn't do bad things, so I'm a good person. It's a brilliant essay. And his essays are all very well thought out, and they don't beat you over the head with stuff. And he includes that philosophy in these stories. And you're right. It can be uplifting. It can be positive and insightful too at the same time.
Yeah. Like the wearing the white hat metaphor.
Yeah.
Olivia Pope.
Yeah, Olivia Pope, exactly. Little scandal reference in there. Clint, it has been so wonderful having you on and chatting with you.
Yes, it really
Listen,
has.
anytime I can hang out and talk with intelligent people about stuff that I did, I'm very, very cool. I want you to have me back so we can talk about Flavia de Luce sometime when you...
Oh,
yeah,
that would be a pleasure. Would you like to plug anything before you get off the call?
We really aren't really doing anything.
No, nothing. Never.
Well, let's see. The Adventure Zone podcast continues on. In quarantine, we're in quarantine anyway all the time. That's how we do the show. But we are in currently the graduation arc that Travis is DMing. And that's been a blast. It's kind of a return to our D&D roots. We have the third graphic novel, Pedals to the Metal, which will be coming out in about a month, with First Second that we did with Carrie Peach. And as wonderful as Gerblins was, as wonderful as Rockport was, in my humble opinion,
agreed.
Pedals to the Metal is like nothing I've ever read or been involved with. It's full of action and a lot of heart, and again, hopefully some positive stuff that'll uplift people.
For sure. I'm going to order that right now as soon as we get off.
I urge everybody to get multiple copies. They give great gifts. We are also working on an animated TV series with Peacock. The Peacock streaming service. So, and we got a few other things. We've got a card game that's coming out. Everything's been kind of, put on hold, not on hold, kind of paused a little bit, but I think, about the only thing that we're not doing right now that we would have been doing is obviously our touring. So we'll see what happens with that, but we're trying to keep busy doing cool stuff like this.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
You are welcome any darn time you want to come on.
Yes,
for sure.
Also, I wanted to say, both characters you played in Amnesty are absolutely, I think, my favorite out of all the ones. You made me cry. So congratulations. You made a grown man cry, Clint.
Ned was one of my favorites too. And we work really hard on these. It's all improv. For our parts, for Justin and Travis and myself, and now obviously Griffin. But we don't work off a script. We don't even know what's coming. But we knew what was coming. We knew what we wanted to do with the characters, and we've also always tried to play straight with them and treat them right and do what should happen. And I'm glad you said that, because I love Ned. And who knows, we may not be. No, shut up, Clint. Shut up. I have strict orders.
All right.
I have strict orders. I am under strict orders.
Understood. Okay. Well, the hope is rekindled for sure. But yes, very exciting things. Very positive. I had never played D&D before I started listening to the Adventure Zone.
Me either.
Right. I did start a little bit. Haven't played near enough, but it's not just a D&D game. It's a story, and all of the arcs are big, sweeping, beautiful stories, and really, really touching and rich and full, and it's mostly because of your personalities, your wonderful family. So
the only other thing I had to throw at, and we've been kind of holding off for a few days because my wife Carol has been ill. We do a live stream on the McElroy family YouTube channel. Where we read chapters of books, and we went to Wonderful Wizard of Oz. We did a Sherlock Holmes story. We did Silver Blaze, as a matter of fact.
Oh, nice.
And now we are wrapping up the Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, because Neil Gaiman gave permission for people to read his stuff streaming. So I'm taking advantage of that and running with it.
Yeah.
And we're almost done with that. I think my wife is on the mend. So I think probably tomorrow evening we'll start with that's at 5:30 Eastern. And we'll be doing that for at least a couple more, and then we're going to decide whether or not to. We did it because people were quarantined, and just to give them something to tune into. And people have started sharing it with their kids at bedtime and stuff.
That's wonderful.
Love that.
Which is
really sweet.
why we try to stay away from like the Jacqueline and Suzanne books or things of that nature. We haven't done 50 Shades of Grey, which
on the list.
that wouldn't translate to kitty time. But we do have a few more of those left to go before we decide what to do. So.
Oh, wonderful! That's fantastic. I got to check that out later too. I have a lot of internet looking up and purchasing to do now.
Yeah, giving us homework.
Yes.
Love it. Good homework. All right. Thanks again. And with that, I call this meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to a close.
Do we
Gavel
vote?
sound.
Gavel
Do we
sound.
vote?
Yep.
Oh, no, we don't vote on that.
I second.
No.
Oh, great.
I got things
The
to
motion
do.
carried.
The motion carries.
Now refreshments.
Yes, now refreshments.